Alright guys, I want to welcome you back for part 3 of our tube chassis building video series. And basically what we're doing here is going to be continuing on with some of the final stages of this rear tube chassis section here, which is going to include building some of the bracketry for these 3 suspension mounts here, and a few gussets and some things around the chassis. So for starters, probably going to work on doing some of the gusseting first, because some of these brackets will be kind of built off of and incorporated into those gussets. So, you know, right here, I've got a main support tube that I welded in between the upper and lower tubes. And what I'm going to be doing is adding some gusset on the backside here. So there'll be a plate that'll essentially kind of fill in this whole space here, and then once I decide on where I want some of these brackets to come off of and such, we might put some holes in there to kind of lighten it up a little bit and those sort of things. But there's going to be a bracket in here, or a gusset in here, that's going to support this. We'll do one on the front side as well, and then I'm going to do one up in here around the front side of this where these tubes join into the chassis. We're going to do a gusset in here, probably come out a little ways here. We'll do another one for the front side. We'll do some gusseting around here just to kind of strengthen some of this stuff up, also give it a cool look too. So we'll do that, and then the last thing we'll do is work on all these suspension mounts off of those areas once that's all finalized. So we'll keep working on this, and I'll talk through some of it. But some of it we're just going to be showing you kind of the sped up process of getting some of these in place. I'm going to start off by making paper templates of these areas where there's going to be gussets. Once the paper's cut and fit in here, then we'll just be able to cut it out of steel and get them in there and get them tacked in. There's nothing really too complicated about it, just getting it cut to the right shape and going from there. So we'll keep working. Alright guys, so I had a little camera mishap. I thought I filmed a time lapse for you guys, just trimming these pieces of paper for my templates for some of these gussets. Turns out the camera wasn't on, but I'm not going to go ahead and redo that just because really it's pretty basic. I mean, trimming paper to be able to fit as a template, obviously, you know, I wasn't really showing anything besides me just marking it and trimming it. So, you know, got these all fit in there. I started with this big one here that's going to go in this location, and it's going to end up kind of bending around and fitting, you know, where these tubes here bend, because they kind of go inward towards the middle of the chassis, and then they bend back parallel with the car in that way. So it'll kind of bend around there a little bit, not too much, just a slight roll in there. It'll end up getting trimmed of some kind here with maybe a hole or something in there, depending on I got to kind of get it in place first, you know, and end up actually building these brackets for these suspension mounts first, so I know where those are going to land before I do anything else to this. So this will be something that once I get it kind of rolled and tacked in place, I'll do the other work first, and then when it's all said and done, I'll end up cutting the tacks, taking this back out, doing any trim work I want to do, maybe even drilling a hole, that sort of thing. So got that one done first, and then move forward with this one here. And got that fit in there, same thing, it'll get trimmed with something here. Did a front one to go here, you know, just to add a little bit of extra strength there where these tubes join back into the original chassis. I'm going to end up doing a gusset on the other side of the little riser post that's in here to separate the 2 rails. So I'll do one on the other side as well, and then it'll all get welded up, and it'll just help to add a little of strength right there. So from there, I moved back, made the little triangle templates to go around this rear suspension mount / cross member for the rear diff. So these will end up going around here. And what I did on all of these is I labeled them, so I wouldn't, you know, so I just remember where they go, how they go. So I labeled the outside of each one. So starting with this one here, L1, so left side of the chassis, L. And then 1 for the furthest one forward, L2, and then the big one here is L3, and then I did L4, L5, L6, and L7, and on each one of these I did a little arrow pointing up to know that these go on the top side, and then an arrow pointing down to know that these go on the bottom. So nothing special, just a quick little reference to be able to, you know, remember the location of them and that sort of thing. So if I did everything correctly, these templates should work for the other side of the frame as well. So you know, we'll show that process once we're done, you know, kind of getting this side tacked in place. So at this point, it's just a matter of laying these out on some 1/8 inch plate and cutting them. So all of the plate work here on the suspension mount, the crossmember, all that is all 1/8 inch plate. So you might think that might be a little bit light for a car chassis work. You know, some people like to go to 3/16, maybe even quarter on stuff, but this car is extremely lightweight. If this car weighs any more than about 1,800 pounds when it's done, it'll probably be a miracle. So very lightweight, very small with the aluminum body. The car's only 12 foot long, nose to tail, so it's not very big. So you know, the 1/8 inch plate, the 1/8 inch gussets, all that will be more than enough. And on the Mustang, I guess a good note to reference on all the Mustang rear suspension parts is that all the bracketry that captures all of the control arm mounts on the Mustang cradle, all of those parts are actually made out of lighter material than you know, than a 1/8 inch or 120 wall. That looks to me more like 090 thickness around there on the factory Mustang cradle. So I'll actually be stepping up that and, you know, making sure that there's obviously plenty of strength in these parts. So yeah, we'll get to laying these out on some steel and get to cutting. All right, guys, so I laid out all the templates here on some sheets of, this is 1/8 inch mild steel plate, and got it all laid out. A tip I usually, or that I give you guys, something that I usually stick with, is whenever I'm doing some templates like this, when I've got multiple templates, I always try to find ways to, you know, join where, you know, the pieces are going to be cut. So that way, instead of making 2 cuts, you know, one for each part of the template, you can make 1 cut, and it gives you a cut for, you know, 2 sides of 2 separate templates. That way you can minimize the amount of waste material and save the most amount of, you know, plate to be able to use you know, on further projects, that sort of thing. So you know, just a tip on that. So got these all in here, and after, you know, I laid them in place, got them traced out, then I marked the L3, like this one I marked here. So each one of these I marked in the same I guess in the same orientation as I wrote on the paper template. That way, you know, I can keep track of, you know, the layout of them and, you know, the order in which they go, all that sort of thing. It's real easy to reference. So now we're just going to jump over here on the bandsaw, cut these out, and then we'll do a little bit of fine-tune sanding on them, and we can start getting them in place. So we'll get to cutting. All right, so you can see I've got the plates all cut out here, cut them out on the bandsaw, fine-tuned all the edges and deburred them on the Radius Master belt sander. So at this point now I'm going to start fitting them in the car and seeing what we got to do to make sure that they all fit perfectly and that sort of thing, and then you know, we'll show you guys the next steps after that. All right, so we got these trimmed up, and now, you know, by holding them up in place, you can see that they're pretty good fit right now, and, you know, we'll obviously finalize their location, that sort of thing. There's the lowers here. Those in there are, so this one's going to have a slight bit of a curve to it, so we need to actually put a little bit of bend in this to finalize that. I do need to kind of notch the corners here just a little bit where this tube has been welded, so needs to be a little bit of a bevel in that corner on both sides to be able to clear the weld. So we'll do that and you know, get it fit in here, figure out exactly how we want to put the curve in here. Same thing with this side. Need to bevel the corners on the inside. This one's going to fit a little different. So these tubes here and here on the bottom, because at this section of these upper and lower tubes, these tubes are parallel to each other. They're the exact same width on the bend, and they're both level this way. But as it bends down and comes forward, obviously there's different angles there, and then these tubes where they join up to are actually staggered. So this upper tube is actually further out and this one's further in. So this section here is not parallel. It's not just these tubes narrowing together. They're actually, they come narrow, but they're also kicked at slightly different angles. So this gusset here is going to end up with a little bit of a twist in it. So where it sits here, it's going to end up kind of twisting out at the top in order to fit both tubes and that sort of thing. So we'll have to get that twisted, get that done, get it fit in there. This one we'll probably end up trimming a little shorter. I just left it long because I'm not sure 100% what I was going to do there, but you know, we'll get this one in here, put some kind of lighting hole in it, and go from there. So we got all these in. We're going to keep fitting them in, get them tacked in place, you know, punch any holes, that sort of thing that we want to do, and you know, get them in here. So. All right, guys, so got all these gussets tacked in place. Gonna walk you through here. The only one I didn't tack in place actually is the front one because I still need to weld up the tubes in the front here, but this one will go in place here. Decided we punched some holes in a couple of them, did a little dimple die just to, I don't know, make it to where it's just not a flat, you know, bracket gusset there, just to give it a little bit of detail, also a little bit of strength in that as well. So we did those. So I still got to tack the front end. I'll get that done obviously after the tubes are welded, that sort of thing. These ones here, I put a little bit of a curve shape in the front of this one just to give it a little style. Left it flat, same thing with this one. Went over to the brake and just used the brake to actually put the little roll in here. You know, and just kind of snuck up on it. Got that in there, put a little curve cut in here, and got those tacked in place. I left these, you know, flat with no holes or anything like that because the bracketry for this mount and this mount here are going to be attaching to these areas. So without 100% knowing where those are attaching yet and that sort of thing, wanted to make sure I didn't put any holes in yet. I can always come back and add something if I want to after these are already done. So got those in there. These ones just got them tacked in place, and also trimmed up the edge of the vertical brackets here. These were a little long. I left them like that on purpose so I could kind of get everything finalized how I wanted it and then decide where I wanted to trim them. So got those trimmed, got them deburred, and they're ready to roll. So at this point, you know, now as you can see, the templates are replaced down through here. So that's all replaced. We got all these back, you know, brackets and that sort of thing. So we're going to take all these templates, transfer them to the other side, make sure they all fit and everything's all good, and then make the gussets for the other side and get it caught up with this side. So. Alright guys, so what you've seen in the time-lapse videos there was getting these gussets and all that stuff welded in completely. Decided to go ahead and finish welding out all the rest of the crossmember pieces, some of the tube risers and things like that we have in here. So at this point, everything that's in the frame is now welded and ready to go. So the next step to be able to finish this up is going to be to finish up the suspension mounting brackets that will then hang off of the frame. So we're going to put these parts of the jig that we made up back in place. We're going to bolt these back in their location, get them set up, and then we'll start laying out the brackets that'll hang off and capture these pickup points for the rear suspension. So we'll keep working. All right guys, so what I've been doing here is working on making some mock-up templates for figuring out what my bracketry needs to look like for these suspension mounts. So I started making this one first, so this will be pretty close to how this is supposed to be here. Then I jumped down to this other mount down here because the inside bracket for this one here, it actually is going to kind of tie in with this one a little bit. So wanted to get this bottom one in place. So got these ones mocked up, cut out to kind of the base shape of the the side profile of the brackets here. Really what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to go ahead and make these ones, but there's actually going to be, I'm going to make a flange that's going to hang off the front of this and come forward and notch around this tube a little bit, just to give some more structure and rigidity to this. Now these are so long, there's a hole that I've drilled here. That's where the center of the mount hole is going to be, but these mount holes are actually slotted. So there's going to be a slotted hole here in the bracket, and that is just for adjustment for the suspension. So this is the lower toe link for this rear suspension. So that's going to be slotted, and then I'm going to weld some pieces of steel onto the new bracket that'll give a place for the cam of the bolt. So there's the bolt has a little cam washer on it that allows me to adjust the angle, and so it slides in that slotted hole. So I'll weld a couple pieces of steel on there, that way it has something to ride on for that cam, and that'll be on both sides of these. So we'll get these cut out, get them fit in place, and get these ones more finalized before we finish up this one, because then I'll build the back side of this bracket, then we'll get this front side built and in place. So I like to use thin aluminum or something easy to work with. You can do steel, but I find just if you got some thin aluminum around, this is, I believe, 063. It's nice and flat and sturdy enough to hold its shape. So when you're making some brackets like this that have to be pretty precise, you can use that flat aluminum to be able to get the precise shape, everything in place, kind of get it shaped up how you want it, and then it's a lot easier to trace, do that sort of thing when you're ready to actually make the steel parts. So we're going to start transferring some of these into steel, and we'll show you guys that process.